Hello and welcome to Inside Your County Government, a podcast that brings you an inside look at the people and events in and around county government that shape our Charles County. I'm your host, Brent Huber. This episode is part of our Boards and Commissions series. Boards and commissions play a crucial role in shaping our community, and over this series we'll be exploring what they do, why they're important, and how to get involved. In this episode, we're talking to Lynn Gilroy, chairman of the Board of Fire and Rescue, and we're going to be talking all about the Board of Fire and Rescue and how it aids in local governance. And before we start, Lynn, I'm going to have to let everybody know that for 6 years, I was on the Board of Fire and Rescue and was acting chair for, I think, the last 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with that out of the way, welcome.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's good to have you here. So why don't we start with just introducing yourself, telling us, who you are and how you got to be on the Board of Fire and Rescue.
Well, I've been with the fire service overall since I was 14 years old, and I'll be 73 coming this December. You can do the math on that. I started out in Prince George's County at the Accokeek Volunteer Fire Department, then went from there to Oxon Hill. After that, I took a hiatus for a while. I was a career firefighter with the federal government and also District of Columbia government. I was on the ambulance for a couple of years, and then I went and worked at Fort Myer. I retired from the government in 2001 from the National and Dulles airports. They were part of the federal government transfer that took place then. So. And then just for purposes that everyone needs to know, I worked at the 911 Emergency Center, so I may have spoken to you in that period of time, and retired from that about 10 or 15 years ago. So I've been doing this for a while. I've been with La Plata Fire Department since 1992, and still there and operating as its treasurer.
So you've been in the fire service pretty much your entire life. Yeah. So
Yes.
So how'd you get to the Board of Fire and Rescue? Talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to talk about what it is.
Sure. The Board of Fire and Rescue, and it kind of commingles with that, is made up of representatives, and part of those representatives is from the Charles County Volunteer Firemen Association Executive Committee and the Charles County Volunteer EMS Executive Committee. So I was elected to the executive committee 2 years ago, and part of that responsibility is to serve on the Board of Fire and Rescue. So how I became chairman is
kind of have an inside scoop on that.
Yeah, the evolution of changes of people from time to time.
Yeah.
And again, that the makeup of the board is a combination of the governor's appointees, and they're appointed by the governor, and then the county commissioners' appointees. There's 2 of those, and then you have the representatives from the Fire Association and the EMS Association, as well as a county commissioner representative.
Right.
So I didn't mean to take your thunder, but that's how I got there. And then I guess by attrition, no one else was standing. I ended up being the chairman. So
yeah, when I stepped down, you were voted in by the board.
Yeah, by the board,
as
right.
chair. Yeah. So let's talk about the Board of Fire and Rescue and exactly what it is and what it does.
Okay, so we come under the Chapter 54 of the Charles County Code. So Chapter 54 talked about volunteer fire companies, rescue squads, mobile intensive care units, and dive rescue units. This is made up of both of the groups. So predominantly, we look at the funding that comes into by the citizens and the businesses that pay fire tax. So the fire tax rate is set in that document, and if you look at your tax bill, you'll see a little line that says fire tax. And that rate has not changed for a number of years. And it's set at 0.064 cents per $100 of assessed value. So if your assessment goes up, so is the amount of fire tax you're going to pay.
And that's 0.646.
0.066. Right.
0.064%.
Yeah. The law itself, the way it was printed, is incorrect. We're trying to get that fixed. It happens when you get a multitude of players getting into scribing the laws, but it's 0.064. So if your assessment is based upon $100 assessed value, so that's where the number comes from. So we look at the fire tax coming in. Then we look in the law, it talks about inspection of equipment. We make sure the equipment is inspected to make sure it meets standards and that type of thing. We look at capital expenditures, and that includes buildings and apparatus that's purchased. And then we get into the length of service awards program. That's like a benefit for our volunteers that have served a considerable period of time. And I'm participant in that, so just as a notice that when you get in there and you've been in it a while, you can collect from it.
Yeah.
So, and then we of course we talked about the makeup, but we also can hear appeals on the length of service awards program and those type of things. But mainly our job is to look at the finances, to approve the distribution of those finances to the fire and EMS companies and dive rescue units, and then also to approve any capital expenditures that comes out of using those funds.
Right. And I think that's something that deserves some attention and some clarity. The Board of Fire and Rescue receives the funding from the fire tax and then distributes that to the stations based on a formula.
Yes.
Yeah, not a budget, right? You want to talk about that a little bit and how that's different?
Yeah, it's the law is very clear. It talks about a formula that is derived by the fire and EMS executive committees. So this formula has been around for a long time. You got to remember now, 1965 is when this fire tax code was derived. And it's been modified as we go along through the years. But the formula is based upon how much a new pumper truck costs, which is over $1.1 million now today. Okay, just looking at that a few years ago, it was like $500,000. Now it has increased by almost 100%. A ladder truck, $2.5 million. You know, again, that was 50% less not too long ago.
Right.
A big rescue squad truck is close to $1 million or more. And then the smaller units is brush trucks and those type of things. Ambulances is $500,000.
Yes.
$500,000 for an ambulance.
Yes.
And so we look at those figures, and then we get into how much the building's going to cost. And now we were having a discussion earlier in some of the meetings we've had that it's harder and harder for us to try and build a new building because the square footage per cost is $500 per square foot.
That's to construct.
That's to construct.
Right.
So what we have now, the last new building that was built, I want to think was probably Newburgh when they built theirs.
We had Benedict. Well, that was a renovation.
Benedict was renovation.
Yeah.
You know, and then we got the new one out in Dentsville. They're looking for something that's not going to be as robust, but it's still going to cost them. Okay. So it is getting challenging to try and do that. And then we have to have the manpower to go along with that. And we call this the fire equipment and supplies. So if we have fire equipment, fire apparatus, we have to equip it. Hose, nozzles, breathing apparatus, you know, that type of thing. So, and then we got building apparatus, building operations, your electric bill, your water bills, these type of things, gas or heating oil,
tires,
tires on the apparatus. All of this mounts up, you know, and so we have a formula built based in there to distribute the money to those departments to operate.
Right.
You know, and we are stewards of the dollar.
Right.
You know, so we participate in that as the Board of Fire and Rescue to make sure the reports are done, financial reports are done at the end of the year. We keep track of those things, and we look at it to make sure that, all the dollars and cents are accounted for.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And we get state grants from what they call the 508. It is a piece of legislation that was passed a long, long time ago. And those are 508 grants. It's attached to when we do a fire report or EMS report and send that to the state, that we get money for doing that. So that helps buy equipment, that helps buy apparatus and that type of thing. So there's a multitude of funds that comes in. And then, of course, we have each department still has to have fundraising.
Right.
In order to have the things that we need beyond that, that's not addressed in our distribution formula.
Right. And just to make this to make this clear, this is funding that's coming from the tax base, the property
Yes.
owners who ultimately benefit from fire and EMS service. It's not funding coming from the county budget.
No. The county collects it. The county collects it, and that's what says in the law, that the county will collect this and then distribute it based upon a formula that is derived by the volunteer fire and EMS groups. And then we bring that to the Board of Fire and Rescue. Board of Fire and Rescue looks at it and says, okay, we're distributing all the money. We're not leaving it sitting there and that type of thing. So it's derived by the taxpayers and the business owners, because there's both a tax element for the property owners, but also for the business owners. So there's two parts of that. And therefore, we distribute the money that we collect. And that's it. We can't magically go and say, hey, look, we need some more money. We would like to do that, but we can't. So,
and there's a whole process for
there is a
spending money.
process,
I mean, it starts at the station.
Right.
You mentioned the cost of apparatus. I know 20 some years ago when I first joined, an ambulance was, I think it was less than 200,000, and now, I mean, one of the last ones that we approved was getting really close to that $500,000 mark, and that's before equipment even gets put on the thing.
Yeah.
But there's a process that the stations have to go through in order to make a capital purchase. Can you talk about
Sure.
that a little bit? Because it's just not like they're spending money.
The first part of that is where they would come in and say, we have a letter of intent. We're going to replace this pumper truck, or we're going to replace this ambulance, or whatever. And then they actually start their process from then. It then goes to the committee within the department that is working with the vendors, such as a distributor of ambulances or distributor of fire trucks and everything. And they actually work on a scope of work, a bid process that is involved. And then we look at the dollars and cents. How much is this unit going to cost us? And do we have the funds to meet that? And we look at a lot of things. We may do possibility of lease purchase. You may do all out just buying the thing and putting it in service. But you have to look at that whole process and see where you're at. What we've been using recently is with an approved buying service that is recognized by what they call the Houston Galveston Area Council, HGAC. And it is an approved buying service. And I believe the county uses that too from time to time for buying multiple vehicles. So we look at that and see if we can get the best bang for our buck.
Right.
And that's where it all boils down to. And then we have to come in, and then as the Board of Fire and Rescue, they bring it back to us. Well, it goes to the executive committee first of the Fire or EMS Association, and they approve it at their level. Once it is approved, it has to be approved by them before it comes before the Board of Fire and Rescue. We don't short circuit that process.
Right.
So then we look at it as a group to see if it meets the needs of the four corners of making sure that we got the bid process is complete, the monies are there, whether we borrow it from a bank or do a lease purchase, that type of thing, and then we approve it or disapprove it. We could disapprove it based upon any number of factors. But if most of the departments know that and they do their due diligence and make sure they're physically responsible to make sure that meets what they need.
That's right. That's right. And I think where some confusion exists in the eyes of the public is that the Board of Fire and Rescue is just essentially a fiduciary responsibility for the monies of the system. They don't really have any operational control. They don't have any influence in anything except how the money is spent. Is that the correct analogy?
I'd say that 95% of our responsibility is to make sure that all the departments are physically responsible, that they're on solid ground with their finances, and making sure what we look that over. We have to get their financial report every year. So when the fiscal year ends June 30, departments actually have CPAs that they hire to bring in and look at their books and put their financial reports, send that to the Board of Fire and Rescue to review.
Okay, so you kind of mentioned this, but I want to go back to it again because it kind of what I would think is one of the biggest challenges facing the board. But what do you think? One of the biggest challenges facing the board?
I think in today's arena, we're looking at a number of things. The Board of Fire and Rescue is one of the pillars that we have to help to make sure the departments are physically responsible in doing those things. And for the most part, I think we've done a pretty good job on that, a yeoman's job, because it is challenging. So we have a difference of people that coming in from time to time that take over as either the president or the chief or the treasurer, that type of thing. Our part is to train them. If they have no background in this, we need to make sure that they're meeting the test of what needs to be done, and that's a challenge.
And I think finding money for equipment that has just skyrocketed in price is a challenge as well.
Yep.
And I think the efficiency of how I have seen, and I know you've seen, moving around that and adapting to that has been almost extraordinary.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, and when we do our distribution formula every year, we look at the apparatus, and these units are on the street 24/7, 365. And ambulances are more used and abused.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And so they become a challenge to replace in a timely fashion, so that it doesn't cost you a whole lot of money to operate. With the fire apparatus today, there's so many moving parts in it, and literally moving parts, that you could have a transmission go tomorrow, and it could cost you anywhere from $13,000 to $15,000 or more dollars. You could have an engine blow. The top part of the engine has to be replaced. And then, so again, we partner with the departments to see what they need. We keep our fingers on the pulse of what's going on, and see what's out there, and say, have you thought about this? Using money from your apparatus account, because you still have to pay the bills.
Right.
At the end of the day, in the end of the month, or until your next distribution.
Right.
So you still gotta pay the bills.
Right.
So, and we think about, well, you got money sitting in your apparatus escrow account. You could borrow from that and pay it back in the future, because you got to keep that unit on the street. It costs a lot more to replace that $2.5 million ladder truck than it does to put a new engine in it.
Right.
So what is your options?
Right.
So and we try and work with the departments on that.
And you just said something that kind of reminded me of something that probably is important to discuss, and that's the board and the associations. They really plan ahead with the distributions, because you said escrow account.
Yeah.
So they're planning ahead, and there is a plan. You want to talk a little bit about, for some of the apparatus, stations just aren't going out and buying them because they can.
No.
I mean, there is a process before you can replace something.
So each year when we talked about the financial position of that with the, I call it the budget, but it's more like it puts money away, distribution. Yeah. Okay, so each year the departments have to take money that they get for the apparatus and building and put that into a separate escrow account. Okay, so that by the time The goal is by the time you have to replace that unit, that you have money to pay for it in cash. Okay? Well, with the busier departments and, the top 4 or 5, like La Plata, Waldorf, Hughesville, those areas are more busier because they're in the development district in Charles County. And so when we're responding to calls, up to Waldorf Station 3 on Old Washington Road is running maybe 5,000-6,000 calls a year, whereas La Plata's running about 3,000 calls a year. So it's different there. But when they're on the street a lot, you got to maintain them. And when the maintaining is a challenge anymore, because it can be running fine, then all of a sudden an injector goes bad on a diesel, that type of stuff. It's a lot of moving parts.
Right. But there seems to be a good plan for the cycling.
Yeah, there is a plan for that.
So we talked about some of the challenges. What about some of the opportunities that's facing the board for the future?
Working with the associations to make sure when they do their financial forecast, they're in tune. Everybody's in the same, working off the same sheet of music, and it is a challenge for us, but it's also an opportunity because we need to look at it and say, are we putting the money in the right places? Is this working out? And in most cases, we find that it does work out because it is some challenges, and it works.
Okay. So, Lynn, anything else you want to talk about with the Board of Fire and Rescue?
There's one thing to do with buildings and apparatus, and all, but the people is what makes this all go round. So we are working very diligently for when we have a recruiter now that we're working with that has been paid for by the fire grant people, the United States Fire Administration, on a fire grant to help us recruit new volunteers. We need new volunteers every day. We've had success, and as well you all know, because you and I both took care of the cadet program with Charles County Cadets in the school system. And we see young men and women come through that, and they have a golden opportunity to learn a trade, either in a medical field or a fire field or both, however they want to go. And that's our next generation we have to look at. But we still have a need for some other people that may step up and become volunteers, and that's the key. We need to have, and you can go to your local fire station, ask them for an application, hang around for a while, see what goes on, and you may be surprised. You might like it.
So for you, Lynn, what's been your most rewarding part of being on the Board of Fire and Rescue so far?
Well, so far, to make sure that we get all the reports in, because when you're dealing with people, it's always challenging when you have projects going on and we try and keep track of those. And I think I can say right now, for the last 8 or 9 months, that every month we've had all the reports turned in by all the departments. We're not deficient in any, but we're also looking at working with groups to make sure that we can continue to do that.
Oh, yeah, and I remember the reports. Absolutely.
Yes, they are challenged.
Awesome. Lynn Gilroy, Chair of the Charles County Board of Fire and Rescue, thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
And that's all we have for this episode, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for listening. If you like this podcast and want to hear more, search Charles County Government on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And be sure to like and subscribe. We're also available on YouTube. Search Charles County Commissioners. And stay connected for all county news, information, and programs by visiting www.charlescountymd.gov/stay connected.